Are we moving toward a one world government? Will out of control spending lead to a financial collapse? What can believers do now to offset big tech's cancel culture? Well, we're going to discuss that and more in this week's TGIF at Work podcast. Stay tuned. How do I bring my faith to work? How do I tap into the power of God in my work-life call? Why am I going through this adversity? Is God mad at me? I'm Hillman, and I've been helping leaders like you answer these questions and more for over 30 years. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's learn and grow together. Welcome to TGIF, Today God is First. Well, welcome to our TGIF at Work podcast. And this week we're going to be speaking with Marc Nuttle. Marc is a good friend and just a real kingdom warrior in the area of economics and politics. So, Marc, good to have you today.
My honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you, Oz.
Let me tell our people a little bit more about you, and I'm going to read right off your short bio because you got a long bio that's even more impressive. But you're a lawyer and economist, author, consultant, and businessman, and you've represented and advised presidents of the United States, leaders of foreign countries, state officials, and corporations, and you've lectured around the world on government policy and economic trends, and advised the United States government, foreign governments, and state governments on budget process, trade, economic development, currency management, domestic and foreign policy, and was part of the President Ronald Reagan's international trade team in the 1980s, and advised and consulted with cities, states, and nations on economic development, tax structure, and budgets. His clients have included the governments of China, Russia, Bulgaria, Ukraine, the United States, the state of Oklahoma, and others. He's advised as legal and political counsel many candidates for federal and state office, and you live in Oklahoma, right?
That's correct. Norman, Oklahoma. Yep.
So, folks, whenever I want to know what's going on in the world and trends and insider information, Marc's my guy, my go-to guy. And he has just such a wealth of experience and, combined with spiritual insights too. And that's what I like about Marc. He can not only give us the facts about what's going on, but also translate that into the spiritual realities of what we see taking place in our nation. So, Marc, as we get started today, I just would be interested to hear your take on what's different in America since the last 20 years. What are some of the tipping points that you see that have caused a fracture in our nation?
Well, it's kind of like watching a child grow up that you don't see very often, and then when you see them, it's dramatic how much they've grown. It's incremental. And my biggest concern is the lack of presence and leadership. I'll be blunt about it, the body of Christ in the country standing on truth. 20 years ago, the church and the various aspects of it and the church mountain had a role to play. Government officials respected that. They respected our opinion, and they wanted our advice and counsel. Didn't always take it, but they at least sought it. They don't anymore. There used to be any number, 15, 20 members of Congress, 4 or 5 senators that were very concerned about biblical principle in government. I don't know if you could bring that many people together again, and they wouldn't stake their careers on it. There's still a few, but not many. And that decline, it to me, really is unacceptable. It's not that the body of Christ and we as Christians or the church in its various aspects are supposed to fix all these problems, but we're supposed to stand and say, this is what we believe is righteous and this is what we believe is unrighteous. Right now, the public's confused as to what that is, because I believe that we have abandoned our obligation and authority in the marketplace of ideas to express those truths.
Do you think that, we heard a statement that began to circulate during the COVID crisis that the church is irrelevant. How would you respond to that today, given what we've seen in the last year?
Well, it's not irrelevant. I mean, of course, God is never irrelevant, but in services, we have declined in what we can collectively do. We don't organize on a national basis or state basis by churches. We become more denominational. We retreated into silos rather than coordinate with each other and just not worry about who got the credit for what reason or what purpose, but how do you advance the character and reflection of Jesus Christ to other people. And so as we have, in my opinion, have kind of declined to defend truth except to ourselves and take a stand on it, whatever the moral issue was. The secular world has encroached upon the citizens of the United States and says that doesn't matter anymore. It's all theological, so it makes no difference. And so then when you get down to services, it's like the communist regimes that you and I both have dealt with in the past. They used to actually emphasize that only the state can provide goods and services for you. Forget anything religious. And of course, in communism, they tried to eliminate the whole concept of God, let alone Jesus Christ. And if people don't have, the other thing the church should do is provide hope. We should provide brotherly love. There should be a network of services out there to deal with all of the needs of the people and help them to help themselves, even if it didn't provide all the services that's required. I don't know. It's on my spirit to tell you this right now. I don't know if it's a good story or not, but back in as late as the 1980s, I was representing doing some work for the state legislature of Pennsylvania. And I was surprised in a budget meeting with the speaker that they were waiting on the Catholic Church to publish its budget for retirement centers, healthcare, hospitals, and education before they finalized their budget as a state. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Oh, the Catholic Church provides all these services." Now, I'm not saying that or Catholicism or anything else. I'm just saying at one time, even a state as large as the state of Pennsylvania coordinated with the church for actual services, and they certainly don't anymore.
Yeah. We're in a place where we've just seen the role of big tech to play a major influencer in our election, what people can say and cannot say. And it's very disturbing to Christians and conservatives, and should be disconcerting to everybody, every American. But as you look at what just took place over the last few months with big tech, what do you see is happening inside your circles to answer big tech's overreach and cancel culture?
Well, first, it's frightening, the control they have, because they are private sector. They're not licensed. This isn't like the public airways of a TV station or a radio station, where the Federal Communications Commission can come in and at least can protest the fact that you've been censored. They have the right to do whatever they want, quite honestly, because the government has no control over the permits. And the fact that big business is into this cancel culture, morals don't matter, absolutes don't exist, there is no eternal principles, is beyond frightening. It is categorically dangerous. Now, your question was, what should we do about it? Well, I often talk about the 4th century Christians. At the fall of the Roman Empire, governments were collapsing all around them. They were still being persecuted. They had no privilege or access to any services of the secular world that were established at that time, or the establishment. And they did it together, Oz. I mean, they actually coordinated their communications then, which was, what we would think today was primitive, and I guess it was. But they managed to survive by providing hope and at least minimal basic services to people. They didn't require you to be saved before they helped you. It didn't matter whether you were Philistine or Jew, Sumerian or Roman. You came to them for help. They first met your needs, your spiritual needs, what would hold you together in your spirit, and then your physical needs. And it was what we think is one of the greatest times of evangelical success and advancement in the history of the world. And look what came from it. Now, the Dark Ages followed that, and there were a lot of problems. But here's the point. We have got to learn how to help each other as Christians. First, support each other. And I believe that in the biblical DNA, if you'll allow me to use that God has prepared each individual to hear the truth and accept it and act upon it when rendered. Now it's up to the Holy Spirit to save people and guide them and to provide that direct contact with God. All we do is present the opportunity. But the receptive nature is there in their souls. And all we have to do is present it. And then we've got the ability to coordinate and connect with each other. We don't even have to put our own network together. We just do it church by church. But we're not doing it right now. We're almost about to go back to our own forts and or caves, if you will, and try to survive. This isn't the time to survive, this is the time to advance the good news.
Isn't that true? And we all know, you and I both are involved with the Great Awakening Project, which is an initiative designed to catalyze revival in America through the 7 spheres. And we know that we can't just convince somebody to change their views. It has to be a heart change. But we also have to use, some of our influence in business and economy and other places to kind of be salt and light in those areas. And, I'm encouraged that I'm hearing about some new social platforms that are about to birth in answer to what's been taking place with big tech. And I've been praying that would be the case, that we would have people that would be godly leaders to develop a platform in answer to this. And hopefully, by having a mass exodus from some of these platforms, we will have made a statement to them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, let me comment on this, because it's a very important project that you just mentioned, the Great Awakening Project. And there's 2 things that need to happen for us to course correct both our influence, but also to help people make the right decisions to save their souls. One is the business community, the Christian business community, needs to organize around you and others like you in the Great Awakening Project on what can we do together, and stop asking, what am I going to do to save myself? In other words, the councils need to form state by state, city by city, with just the purpose of understanding, if we were 4th century Christians and we were under attack, what would we do about it? They need to come with some answers on their own, with your help, by the way. And that's one thing. The other is that, and we'll get to this, I think, in the questions, but we need to start building what some call the economic arc, because some tough times are coming on us. We can get into that, and I'm not going to make hard predictions today, but as an economist, having been trained by Milton Friedman, I believe in the economic principles that he taught me. And there is no way that we're going to print this 1.9 trillion on top of 5.5 and not have some impact around the world somewhere, even if it doesn't happen in the United States first. I work in Central and South America now, and somewhat Africa, and I can tell you those governments are struggling mightily. Some stuff's coming this year. And if we don't provide a connection for these, economic system, that they can a lifeline, if you will. But business leaders need to unite together and figure this out.
Yeah.
And here's why, and I promise I'll stop. The truth, Oz, will support itself. You launch the truth and it flows freely. It doesn't, it's almost like it's weightless. It will hold itself up. The lies have to be propped up. All we have to do is speak the truth, but we got to do it together. We can't just, okay, and then go back to our own comfort zones and not help somebody else who's struggling. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great lead in to what I wanted to talk to you about today, and that is the National Federation of Christian-Owned Businesses is a new initiative that was launched last year under your leadership, and it is we've got Christian business organizations and chambers and different groups, but what makes this one unique? And tell us the mindset behind that, and what will be accomplished through it.
Well, first, its mission statement is to support the foundation that Christians have the right to practice their faith in the marketplace, that we don't have to shed our Christian identity, whatever our business or our service is, as simple as that. But it's a purely business organization formed to support that premise but also to lobby, to explain this policy from taxes to healthcare, things as simple as as you know, these numbers, 50% of the non-farm adult workforce in the United States works for a business of 25 employees or less. We're unique in the world on that. That's partly because of our freedom. But of those 25 employees, the first 7 are usually family members of some sort. So family-owned businesses, which there's 10 million Christian family-owned businesses in the United States. It's a big number, and it's a big number of people they employ. A lot of times it'll be a mother and a daughter, and they have a grandchild. They don't need the government to tell them about parental leave. They don't need the government to say that the daughter will have so much time away from the business and not bring the granddaughter to work. I mean, these are things that Christian families have figured out for 6,000 years, well, not 6,000 years, 2,000 years. And they're capable. The government needs to work with them, is my point. And we advocate those things, and that the uniqueness of Christian family-owned businesses. There's absolutely no threat to the marketplace. There's no harm to anybody's constitutional rights. What we've got to do is defend the First Amendment and the right to exercise our beliefs religiously extends to the marketplace. That's the purpose of it.
You know, I've been in this space for 25 years of helping equip men and women in the marketplace, especially business owners. But in spite of all the growth that we've seen in this area, probably less than 1 to 2%, the combined addition of all the workplace ministries is we're serving less than 1 to 2% of the total audience. And I know you and I've talked about that there's probably 30 million small businesses in America, and we have estimated 10 million of those being Christian-owned businesses. So I know that you and myself and others have a goal of reaching those 10 million Christian-owned businesses. Give us a little bit more specifics on what the organization will do. And let me give out the website before I forget, nfcb.us, if you want to learn more about National Federation of Christian Businesses. That's www.nfcb.us. What are some specific goals that we'll have in that?
Well, there are 2 that have been launched this year. One, we meet. We have members now in 30 states and state capitals. We deal with both federal, state, and local issues. But the purpose of the meetings is to build a business council that actually talks about it from their viewpoint. They decide, what are we going to do to stop this encroachment on our ability to practice our faith in the marketplace? And it's not just practice your faith, it's operate your business with your wife and family and what you want to pass on in the business. A lot of Christian businesses see this as generational. So it's also a family matter. It's not just a policy matter. But what can they do? And it's different by state. It depends on the state you're in. And so these councils are formed. The second is that we're involved with state initiatives, because sometimes the problem is a state issue, not a federal issue. And there is the left or the progressives are organized. One of the other things I would mention to you that I think we possibly a mistake that we've made as Christians. There is no Republican Party at the grassroots, not organizationally. It doesn't exist. There are states now that don't even hold a state convention. The last remnant of any organization up into 2020 was Wisconsin. I don't think it exists anymore. We can go into why and a lot of reasons why. And you didn't mention my resume, but I actually was executive director of the Republican Congressional Committee in the 1980 cycle. So I have deep roots, not because I believe in principles first, but the Republican Party was open to Christian ideas. And the Democratic Party, even back then, was moving left. Well, the party doesn't exist. And so we made, I think, a mistake of allowing the party to carry those messages when we should have been carrying it ourselves. But second, the Democratic Party doesn't fare much better, except that the left has organized through liberal organizations. And they are organized at the state level. I worked in those Georgia Senate runoffs. I could tell you about ID turnout and communication and things they're doing organizationally that we can't match right now and will not, in my opinion, by 2022. But that's another thing that's changed in the last 20 years. And so the grassroots Oz is being driven strictly right now by ideological issues, identity, and perspectives. And we don't have that organization to match it. The National Federation of Christian Businesses is beginning in the embryonic stages to rebuild that organization, to be able to coordinate between each other, but also at the federal, state, and local level.
So I encourage you listening to join that organization, and together we can make a difference. You know, Billy Graham said several years ago, the next great awakening will come through believers in the workplace. And, you know, we lack leadership in so many areas today. And I think it's the business community that's really going to make a difference in the nation in these days that we find ourselves. So let's transition and talk a little bit about the World Economic Forum. You know, this is an organization that is seeking to have great influence in the world. And you have personal knowledge of some of the advocacy things that they're all about. And I think most Christians would be shocked once they hear some of what's going on there. So give us some insight about that.
The World Economic Forum was founded in 1971 for the proposed purpose of establishing the United States of Europe. They had the idea that the sovereign states of Europe could act as the sovereign states of the United States does, and trying to match our economy, but also grow into a currency that would match the dollar in predominance in the world. Now, that was the golden state, and their 50th anniversary is this year. We'll get to here in just a second. But it took them almost 30 years, and they were able to form the EU, Economic Union. They did issue and launched the euro, their currency, and they've struggled with it. Some of the reasons is that those sovereign states are not like the United States. They weren't formed as a republic. They still don't allow the free flow and movement of labor, which is critical to any free, open society on economics. And that's, in my opinion, one reason why they failed. And they have failed. They're a group of states now burdened with debt. Their currency is traded. I mean, it's a major currency, but it's not a world currency. And it has never challenged the dollar. And so because of that, they're in a quandary, what to do. They can't cut their budgets. They can't meet the social services needs of a society that's based on a landlord-tenant relationship, and they're in trouble. So here's what they've decided to do. The World Economic Forum now has published now. This is not me speculating. This is off of their website, what they call the Great Reset. And the Great Reset has several divisions to it. There's a health reset, a social reset. The one that bothers me the most, of course, is the Great Economic Reset, which Al Gore openly calls for the redistribution of capital from rich nations to poor nations. Now let's talk a minute about what is it exactly that they're talking about. It's things like this. I would say that in a simple sentence, what they're asking for is the coordination of sovereign nations in the world for a one world objective. They don't call it one world government, but it's a one world authority if you sign on to it, to achieve objectives regardless of what the interest is of the sovereign state that's involved. The first, what I call the Bermuda Triangle, they're political. They're very wise and well, deceitful in my opinion, but it's climate change, and that they've won the moral high ground on that. Nobody can be opposed to it. The very first executive order that President Biden issued, first order, was to re-enter the Paris Climate Accords and send John Kerry, former Secretary of State and presidential candidate, to Paris to re-enter those accords and work with them in the World Economic Forum. The second is world health care. Bill Gates has proposed an idea to the WEF of a 6,000 point grid around the world. So just picture the world with this grid, like a matrix around. You can visualize it. And each one of these points are institutes funded by the World Economic Forum and its member states, which would take all governments of the world to enforce if it covers the earth. And they do some research and other things, but their primary, and this is right out of an interview on CBS News. Now, this isn't, again, me speculating. The primary purpose is to watch for the next pandemic, to do tests, and as soon as it appears that something is out of control, to shut down that region of the world so we don't have another Wuhan crisis like we did this time. That seems meritable, Oz, except that it requires every government of the world to be subservient to a one world authority that tells you how to provide health care. And they want to run it back to the World Health Organization at the UN. And then the third leg of that triangle is that there are 193 countries recognized by the UN, but the G20 is about as far as you can go with any country that's got any ability to pay for anything beyond their basic needs. I mean, that sounds stark, but it's true. And when you get past actually about 17 of those countries, including countries as well known as Austria, they do not have $1 trillion GDP. And they are in a problem now of too much debt, more debt than their gross domestic product. Putting that in individual terms, it would be like you take all your assets and all the money you make, and you're 100% in debt to every asset you got, and you can't afford to pay your debt. That's where these countries find themselves. But anyway, I digress. There's 173 countries that can't afford the one world system that these guys are proposing. So that's where the great economic reset comes in. You tax wealthy nations to help fund poorer nations so you can have this climate control and World Health Organization grid. And then there's other aspects, this World Labor Organization. The World Economic Forum believes, as the UN does, that anything the world uses collectively that should be organized and controlled by a world organization. The only thing they've been able to pass is the law of the sea treaty. We all use the sea, and every nation now adheres to how you mine in the sea and fishing and other things. And it seems, and it is good. I mean, protecting the environment is a Christian perspective, by the way. But take that to the air you breathe, that's climate control. The healthcare of the world, therefore, that's important. Pandemics are worldwide. Capital, they see as a world asset. And then the next is the internet, all communication, banking and finance, and then research and development. And when you put all that together, education, labor, the internet, they control every aspect of human life, and that's what they're proposing. Now, besides being dangerous, it's anti-biblical in that the Lord gave us sovereign nations with boundaries for a purpose. So that you can be accountable as sheep and goat nations. But it's also so you can measure your perspective against each other and hold each other accountable on the actions within your countries. And then Christians working across borders to help these governments see the light of the biblical principles of Jehovah God, but also Jesus Christ. Now, this usurps and eliminates all that. It eliminates this type of organization that they are proposing will eliminate small business. Certainly family businesses, because you can't afford the freight. You can't pay you have to be a big business to operate in a system like that. And big business is subsidized. They won't subsidize small business. A lot of big business is subsidized. Agriculture, to some extent oil and gas, but particularly money, banking, finance, insurance. Those are all subsidized in many different ways by the government. Small business doesn't get those subsidies. And so they basically get eliminated in the process. And those are the detriments, but you will be subject to your inability to follow the destiny that the Lord had in store for you before you were born in a system like that. It makes no sense. They're doubling down on socialism. And I remind you, not you, but people, that only two things that ever happened, ever, when socialism was tried in 6,000 years of recorded history. Only two things ever happened. One, it failed, and failed miserably, as in Venezuela today, and the state has to restructure, or it evolved into communism and total dictatorial control where God is censored and eliminated from society. Okay, that's the World Economic Forum and what we're up against. And then the threat that I see is that things are going to happen in 2021. I try to, as Milton Friedman taught me, not make projections past 90 days. And the next 90 days seem safe. Stock market's doing okay. We've printed and we are printing and sending out checks for $1.9 trillion to state and local governments and individuals. And so far, so good. But what Dr. Friedman just impressed upon me mightily was that for every action of government in a distortion of an economic situation, there's an equal and opposite reaction somewhere else in the system. And we forget that the dollar, one thing is, and I don't want to get into too much economic theory unless you want to, but the dollar is not just the primary currency, it is the world's currency. And like there are countries like Colombia that they don't even have a currency, they use the dollar. The dollar is their currency. Therefore, the Federal Reserve is the Federal Reserve of the world, not just of the United States. We're unique in that. And the Chinese system that's trying to replace us, by the way, is not anything like our system. They have their own World Bank, their own IMF, International Monetary Fund, the Asian Pacific Fund. I mean, they are completely operating under a communist system that is incapable of being coordinated with the capitalist system in the West. And one has to win over the other. And so when we do things like print $1.9 trillion, it does impact other countries, particularly in Africa, Central and South America, that have currencies that can't even trade across their borders. They can use them inside their borders and that's it. And we have to be cognizant of that. And so here's where I'm going with this is we have to develop our own economic plan and alliance between Christian businesses and Christian leaders to at least provide an alternative to the World Economic Forum, because if things get tough, they'll at least get dicey, if not dire, sometime in the next 18 months. And if they're the only opportunity out there for survival, it gets back to your very first question that you presented to me, is that some now in government say the church is irrelevant because we don't provide basic services. And if you need basic healthcare and services quickly, you have to go to the government. And if you put it in that context only, yes, the government's more important. Well, and I'm not saying that the church has to replace this. I'm saying that Christian business leaders and government leaders around the world need to align with each other in both organization and policy to at least give every country, business, and person in the world an alternative choice to joining a one world government that has not God at its center.
Yeah, that leads us to talk about another initiative that I was not familiar with called the Global Partnership Exchange. Tell us what that is.
Well, I started the Global Partnership Exchange as a for-profit company building a platform as we speak so that Christian businesses and countries can find each other in a safe environment on a platform to buy and sell to each other. The main benefit of it it'll be cheaper and more efficient. It'll include freight forwarding, banking, and finance when it's finally ready. It'll be in full service by late summer. But there's a lot to do to build a platform like this, as you can imagine. But it will be an ecosystem totally capable of supporting ethical business processes throughout the world. Now, it's not just a Christian platform. It's basically anybody can get on there as long as they agree with our creed, which is you pay a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. You take care of your employees to at least a certain extent. You abide by the law. You don't charge usury rates. You don't gouge. These are all biblical principles in the Old Testament. And we set those standards. But the main benefit, Oz, will be that a Christian business family or an ethical business in, pick the country, Ukraine, Africa, can find a counterpart to produce a product, but also distribute it back into the United States, say through Central or South America, and know the person on the other end is ethical, committed to what they say, and not scam or steal their money. The only platform that exists like this now is a company called Alibaba in China. Their biggest problem today is scammers. 40% of the people on the platform are pirates, just there to get what you got, steal what they can, and move on. And we're moving into a frontier that still reminds me of the 4th century, when society broke down and you didn't know who you're dealing with. You had to have militia help you get from point A to point B. It was some pretty dark times there for about 100 years after the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, I'm not predicting that or dire stuff. I'm just saying that to be an alternative to the World Economic Forum and existing channels today, Global Partnership Exchange will provide a safe and ethical platform for Christian businesses to find each other. Now, one of the things that we also have a counterpart called the World Council of Economic Policy. The World Council of Economic Policy is a 501c3 charitable organization, just like the World Economic Forum. Its chartered purpose that the IRS granted, which this is years ago that I got this, I'm not sure they do it today, but its charitable purpose is to advance free enterprise as a society, as a benefit to society. In other words, like a church or education or anything else. And so that's what we do. We defend free enterprise, free choice. It all goes back to free will and free agency, which is what Lord intended us to have. And it will have policy that it will support, like a flat tax, and how you charge for goods and services. So this will be next year before we can implement on a platform we're building today. But the Global Partnership Exchange will be a membership platform where you declare who you are. You're glad for us to check you out. You are proud of who you are, and you know the person you're dealing with on the other end in tough times that may be coming is somebody you can trust to fulfill the obligations that they committed to. It's in process now. There are members joining as we speak, but the full service will be available late summer.
Oh, okay. And the website is the website's up though, right?
Yeah, no, you can go there and join now.
Yeah, globalpartnershipexchange.com is the website, globalpartnershipexchange.com. So, well, Mark, you're doing a great job in giving Christians alternatives to the world system, and that's really what we need to be about, And so, I want to ask one other question, and that is, as you look at the amount of debt we're taking on as a nation, which it seems like the Democrats just have no interest in anything but spending. Over the next 2 years, or it could be a lot less, what's the percentage chance you think we're going to have a major crash because of the debt?
Well, I'm careful about these kind of predictions, but I would say that in the next 2 years, there's 100% chance that you will have to choose one system over the other. Mm-hmm. Now, whether there's a crash involved in it, but what do I mean by that? If we've got a minute, let's talk about it. The World Economic Forum, as I mentioned, is a European-based organization that was basically trying to make socialism work by uniting European states and really kind of doubling down on socialism as a bigger environment, more people establish their own currency, as I said. It hasn't worked. So now enters China. China is not even, of course, they're communistic. There's no democracy. President Xi is premier for life. He has more power today, really, than Mao did. It's really, when you think about it, when he speaks, it becomes constitutional law. So they are into a model and a procedure that they know they can't win unless there is no free enterprise. As long as free enterprise, free choice, and freedom exist, their system is fragile and it will not succeed. But if the total world goes dark and the United States can't support its partners anymore, and Europe's hedging its bet, I'm disappointed in Europe, because rather than worry about freedom, and of course, you know better than I, of course, being from the UK, what God means to Europe right now and how it has been diminished there. But they don't choose freedom, they choose survival. And that is the wrong choice to make in the short term. And so they're moving toward China. And Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, cut a deal late last year with China to sell basic manufactured goods, primarily cars, with some privilege and priority to keep her economy alive. But for doing that, China has extracted demands from Germany on how they finance and access they've got to the European market. China is glad for Europe to continue to double down on socialism. Why? Because the comment I made is that in 6,000 years of recorded history, only two things have happened with socialism. It collapses miserably or it evolves into communism. So by helping Europe double down on socialism, China's moving Europe into their economic realm. And that's what's going on. And so China will be part of the World Economic Forum. Their 50th anniversary is now scheduled for a meeting in late August in Singapore. And it's their 50th anniversary celebration, and that's what is titled "And the Great Reset." China will participate in that. Now, so where is all this going? What do I say there might not be a collapse? I could see a scenario where the world goes dark, we're all under a communist regime, and you line up someplace to get your stipend. But let me just tell you a story real quick about Milton Friedman, and then what it means to Christians. Milton Friedman was Jewish, of course, and he practiced Judaism. And we talked about it. We talked about the Old Testament together. And I remember much time he said, "Yeah, I can prove to you mathematically at any given time a 10% of your income to support government is what's appropriate." He said, "Do you think that's any?" And I can prove that to you mathematically in economic terms. He said, "Do you think it's a coincidence or by accident that the general tithe in the Old Testament was 10%? I mean, it's all there. All of it's in the Bible, and all can be confirmed today through practices that we know as principles of economics." But here's what he said to me. We were on a plane together, a small plane, and we're working on a balanced budget constitutional amendment proposal at the time. It's about 2:00 in the morning. I can remember where I was standing yesterday. When he came, it's cold, it was in New Hampshire, and he came out from under the wing of the plane, he grabbed my coat lapels, and he said, "Mark, you've got, I have to tell you this, and you've got to commit to this." He said, if you've got to convince members of Congress this, if in the Middle Ages the king, who controlled all laws, all rents, had serfs and slaves to work his fields, had the power of the coin, and his word was law, could not print and borrow his way out of trouble then, what makes you think the government can do it today? You have got to get that across to them. You cannot print and borrow your way out of trouble. Okay. In Christian terms, this is how I explain it. If governments can print and borrow forever and there's no consequences, then you don't need God. You're creating your own manna. In other words, if it is possible to just print money and borrow and the system goes on and just get bigger and join in with China and do that, then all the government would be is a council of judges who rule on how to give you money and what you want with this for the purpose of whatever the government thinks is moral at the time. In other words, you just distribute money. It doesn't work that way. It's impossible. So one of two things will happen. There'll be a collapse and a complete restructuring, or we will move into a one world socialistic system where China is dominant, and then God is eliminated as a component of consideration. One of those two things, and to me, they're both equally bad.
Mark, you do a newsletter. I think some people everyone actually will find helpful about current events and specific things they can do. Tell us about that newsletter.
Well, thanks. It's called the Nuttle Report. You can find it at marcnuttle.com. It comes out every Tuesday.
Marc is spelled M-A-R-C.
Thank you. It's M-A-R-C, Nuttle.com. And I write it every Tuesday on some current event, internationally or nationally. And what does it mean to Christians, and what is the Christian perspective on how to address it? For instance, I addressed the crisis of Harry and Meghan with the crown in Great Britain, and take it back to 1 Samuel 7:8, and those chapters 7 and 8, where God was king, and they rejected him as king. Chose Saul, and he wondered what would happen, and what it means for kingships and why. Those kind of things. But I bring it into terms. It's all there. There's not a thing that we're doing in the world today that you can't relate to the Bible, and make an argument out of it. Of what is the rational principle perspective? Anyway, it's the Nuttle Report every Tuesday, and I would enjoy anybody who wants to. And then there's a comment page there too if you want to enjoy having your comments.
Great, marcnuttle.com, and So check that out.
I think that August, September is going to be a big couple of months where decisions are going to have to be made by government. I don't know this. Are you familiar with Bob Jones' prophecy about the Iceland volcano?
Mm-mm.
Well, this is Rick Joyner. I'm going to maybe ask him to write about it, but he sent out word after that volcano just erupted in Iceland.
Mm.
That Bob Jones prophesied in 2010 that when a volcano that had been dormant for so many thousands of years erupted in Iceland, it was an indication an economic crisis was about to happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, and I knew Bob, and I didn't know all of his prophecies, but pretty well known prophetic voice. And it did catch my attention that volcano had been dormant for 6,000 years, which goes back to the beginning of history as far as geological volcanoist, whatever the word is, believe. Anyway, it erupted, and it did it with I don't think it's by accident that we've got this crisis that could develop in currency management. We didn't talk about Bitcoin and some other things that are disrupting the marketplace out there. These things Bitcoin is incompatible, by the way, with currency management of a sovereign country. Sovereigns can't let Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these other currencies become cross-border currencies, because then they can't tax it, they can't track it, they can't pay for government services. See, so there's a conflict coming between governments and Bitcoin, and when that happens, and they can't manage the underground economy, it'll break governments. So that's something we're looking at now. But I just think that August, September, this may all come to a head, and Christian businesses. There's a lot of Christian businesses out there that don't see themselves as Christians in their business. They go to church on Sunday and it's just never been taught there. So you're like being a Christian on a soccer team or a men's softball league. You act like you're Christian, but you're not trying to organize a team as a Christian team.
Wow. Well, we could go on for hours here, folks, but you can see why I had Mark on today. It's just incredible information and insight and wisdom for us. So you have the links to the various websites that were displayed on your screen. So check those out. And what would one thing you could say to believers out there that they could do today to contribute to us causing revival in our nation in a practical sense?
Number one, understand truth. Understand what the Bible tells us is true. Number two, stand on it, defend it, discuss it with your friends, follow your leadership laws and others in the marketplace. One or two or three Christians anywhere speaking truth, you're going to be surprised at how it will carry its own weight. Don't allow the lie to continue that we have to choose this for survivability rather than God's laws. But one, understand, when I say understand the truth, you listen to your podcast and, okay, what is truth? And make a simple determination for yourself on how you are going to respect God's law and reflect Christ. That's number one. And then number two, stand on it. And you don't have to be angry about it. You don't have to stand on the corner. You don't even have to be political. Just state your position and your belief in what we should be doing in the marketplace with our families, governmentally, in our relationship as Christians in this system of things. We are not of this system. We're not citizens. We're citizens of the kingdom. We operate in this system of things so that we can show others what our faith means to our belief and opportunity. It requires no money. It just requires the courage to stand on what you believe.
Amen. That's a good word, Mark. Well, thanks for being with us, Mark. And we'll join you in prayer for the launch of those initiatives, and that God will raise up an army to really be the salt and light in our culture today. Thanks so much, Mark.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Let's face it, we all want to make a difference. We want to live for Christ. We want our work to have meaning deep down. We all want to live a larger story to make a difference in the world. But how do we do this? It doesn't just happen. We must invest in our spiritual and professional life that involves spiritual mentoring and training. But where do we go to get that kind of spiritual mentoring and professional training? Is it at church, a conference, a school? The Change Agent Master Mentor Program is the answer to that question, founded by Hillman. He is a pioneer in marketplace ministry and has had a 40-year advertising and business career, working with clients like American Express, Steinway Pianos, Thomas Nelson Publishers, and a host of other successful companies. He understands the challenge of living for Christ in a pressure-packed business environment. He created the Change Agent Master Mentor Program to help leaders. Us will help you realize your dream of being successful in your career and having an influence on your world. The Change Agent Master Mentor Program is designed for you to realize your larger story, to understand your purpose, to learn and apply your faith life to your work life from us and other proven workspace leaders who are doing it. Our online course and group mentoring will help you become God's change agent, to be a cultural influencer and succeed in your work-life call, and grow in your relationship with God and with other members of the Change Agent Master Mentor Program. Come join us. Let's influence the world together. www.camastermentor.com